What's today? Hayom Yom Nishin. Today is Sunday. It's Yud Aleph Kislev. Yesterday was Yud Kislev. I wasn't here Friday, so we did Yud Kislev on Thursday. We did Tess and Yud Kislev on Thursday. But I want to mention the Mitla Rebbe Chachik Epis Avort, something, and maybe something that I didn't mention before. There's a long story in Likutei Deburim, a long story. I haven't seen the story in many, many years. And I'm starting to doubt my memory at this point in my life. But there's a long story in Likutei Deburim, which is a fascinating story, very interesting story. The story is that the Mitla Rebbe, in his Nesius, in his Hanhaga, there were a lot of things that contributed to Yoifi Chitzayni of Hasidus Chabad. That Hasidus Chabad should not only be deep, but it should actually be beautiful on the outside. Not that the external beauty takes away from the internal integrity. That would be Sheker Achein, the Hevel HaYefi. But rather, Imnal Matosi Chein, that the outside should reflect the inside. We know from Sichas, Rebbe spoke about this, it's in Likutei Deburim also, the Alter Rebbe gewollt einführen by Chassidim in Hanegina. The Alter Rebbe wanted Chassidim to sing, and dafke beautiful Negunim. Chabad Negina is so, you see today, everybody, as much as they don't want to admit it, you want to sing a nice Nigin at a Chasana or an Stamazeh Kumzit, you sing Chabad Negunim, it's the best Negunim that we have, the best Negunim that exists. In any case, but the Mitla Rebbe, this was in its peak. The Mitla Rebbe had a kapella, and the previous Rebbe writes, Mizamrim Beper, and then Shodim Beklei Shir. Maybe I'm saying it backwards. Shodim Beper, Mizamrim Beklei Shir. The Rebbe had pushed an orchestra and a choir of Chazonim who sang and performed and composed Negunim by the Mitla Rebbe. Years and years and years ago in Chabad, there was a young man who actually researched the names of the Chazonim who were the Mitla Rebbe's Kapella. The Mitla Rebbe lived a very long time ago, yeah. He became a Rebbe in 1813, 1812. It's 200 years ago. So how he researches, I don't know, but apparently the Chazonim of Mitla Rebbe's Kapella were younger Leitlach. And then later, after the Histalkus of the Mitla Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek didn't need them. They went on to become famous Chazonim, and he pushed as pictures of individual men who were pushed participants as younger light in the Kapella, the Mitla Rebbe. They were pushed on staff. He paid them, and there were special occasions when they would play and perform and sing and so on. Another thing that the Mitla Rebbe had was he had horses, cavalry, fed. Like we know by Deruzha, there was such a thing in Indian also. And there were occasions where the Mitla Rebbe would come out onto a porch of some sort, and there were Chassidim who would ride these horses and do some kind of maneuvers. To understand the pnimius of this is beyond me. I don't understand what this was, but this was not entertainment. But the Mitla Rebbe wasn't shaykhis entertainment. The Mitla Rebbe was shaykhis telam hazeh. It was all pnimius dike things. It was ruchnius dike yonim, and this was one of the aspects of the external beauty that existed by the Mitla Rebbe. After the Mitla Rebbe passed away, all of these things discontinued, because as I explained to you back on Thursday, because the government started to meddle into his business and to want to look at his books and so on, and the Tzemach Tzedek felt that it was preferred to reduce the chitzonius, the ketumah, l'chsidis, and to take away ein abisha. People should stop paying such close attention to Lubavitch. Which means that in a certain way, and it's very hard for us to know this, because the whole Nesius of the Mitla Rebbe is 15 years. It was a very short Nesius. And so much happened during those 15 years. Not only in terms of revealing chsidis, but developing, God should forgive me for saying a bad word, a Chabad culture. The Mitla Rebbe developed a beautiful Chabad, b'chitonius, and he expected that the Chassidim should have a legitimate, a precise pnimius behind that. It shouldn't become a pretty suit chas v'sholom. It shouldn't become only a chitzonius. But it was not continued after the Mitla Rebbe. Anyway, this is the story. That the Mitla Rebbe came out one day, and he said that the horses should do their maneuvers, and he stood and watched. And there were many chassidim, and the Rebbe was encouraging the chassidim to sing and dance and be besimcha. Again, it's hard to visualize how this looked. It's hard for me to imagine how this looked, but this is the story as it's brought. And one of the younger light riding on the horses was his own son, Reb Nochem. His name is Reb Nochem. His name was Menachem Nachum, and as I told you many times, he was most likely a name after the Nachum Chernobyl, which means that the Alter Rebbe considered Nachum Chernobyl in a certain kind of a way, almost like a Rebbe of his. And Nachum was much older than Alter Rebbe. Anyway, they were doing these maneuvers, and the Chassidim were singing and dancing, and one of the Chassidim ran over to the Mittler Rebbe and told him that Nachum fell off his horse, and the horse trampled him. And that he's in a very, very bad condition, materially. And the Mittler Rebbe's response was, he said to all the Chassidim, they should be even more besimcha. And they should be more freilich. And they came a few minutes later to say that he's literally goises, he's dying. And the Mittler Rebbe's response was not to run over and see how he's doing, but to say that they should be even more besimcha. The end of the story is he came out of it without a scratch. Without a scratch. And the Mittler Rebbe later explained that he saw Baruch Kodsher that there was something above his son of Nachum. And that there was a mamish of sakonas chayim. So he decided to the Mittler Rebbe that Simcha is Mavatelas Dinim, that he's going to use Simcha as a tool of breaking the Dinim. And he did it. The Poyel Mamish. In other words, this is not a vort. It's a Sipur, Maiser Rav, like the Rebbe always says. Maiser Rav. In other words, Maiser Rav means, Maiser Rav doesn't mean a Maiser of a Rebbe. Maiser Rav means, a Maiser is the greatest thing. That's the title. The meaning of the words Maiser Rav is not a Maiser from Arov. Maiser Rav means, when you want to paskin a halacha, and one guy says, I saw in Shulchan Aruch like this. Another guy says, I saw in Sefer Hagim like this. And the third guy says, I saw with my eyes the Rebbe do. Kach v'kach, Maiser Rav. The one who relates what he saw that the Rebbe did b'poil, that becomes the minik. And this is Maiser Rav of the Mittler Rebbe, who he saved his own son's life through Simcha. Pashat and Pras. Which is a Moed in the Keirah. There's a story in Chaim Mintz. They were farsing it recently. I don't remember. Chaim Mintz is a shliach in California. And he's a Chassidish Neshama. He's very connected to the Rebbe. The story was there was someone in his community, I don't remember all the details, who was Pashat dying for a very long time. They were very sick and they kept on getting worse and worse. And there was a young man with he had little children and he had a wife. So this Meshuggah Chaim Mintz went to the yeshiva and took a minyan bachrim and they went into the ICU and started singing and dancing. That's what he did. That's exactly what he did. And the end of the story was the guy had a full recovery. You can hear him telling the story. He was Pashat dying, and his wife, they'd been involved with Lubavitch with him for many, many, many years. And she said, what am I going to do? So he says, okay, Eis Laseis. Can you imagine a young man, a Lubavitch man here in our generation, not up an alter chosset, not Friedrich and Don. He went to the yeshiva, he filled up a van with bachrim, he went into the ICU, which is such a ridiculous thing. How do you get 10 people into the ICU in Bechlal? And anybody who's been in ICU knows in ICU there's no rooms. In ICU there's no rooms. It's one of the most strange phenomena. They say they want to observe the patients. The bottom line is, it doesn't contribute to privacy, it doesn't contribute to quiet, it probably doesn't even contribute to hygiene. But that's how ICUs are set up. There's no privacy. It's little curtains, shmatas, and you're sitting right in front of the desk. And they went into this little cubicle, and they sang and they danced, and the man actually recovered. In other words, it's a sipur, b'poyel mamish, that happened by a younger man who's no better than anybody else. Poshta Choset believes in the messages of the Rebbe, of Trach good v'zayin good, v'segeren good. So I'm sharing the story, that Simcha has paid its gedet, and again, it's not just an idea which says in a Maimach Chassidus, it's a Maisa b'poyel mamish. It's a story with the Mittler Rebbe. Okay, let's learn Tanya. We're holding on page Zayin Amid Aleph by the new paragraph. Page 7. Page 7. Page Dalet. That's right. That's page 7. Yeah. The Hebrew goes in Dafim and the English goes in Amudim. That's all. Okay. Now I want to say this. I'm gonna do something really bad today, but I've been thinking about this the whole week. So I'm gonna do it, and then I'll apologize 5 times before, during, and after. Yeah. I started learning Tanya when I was a boy. My first Malamdim taught me Tanya when I was 14 years old. I remember learning Tanya the first time. I remember the Malamdim. And of course, since then I've learned Tanya many, many times, and I've had the opportunity to teach Tanya many times. And there's a tradition that in Tanya you don't say a pshat. In Tanya, you don't say your own interpretation. Tanya, you say what says, or what you heard, particularly from the Rabbeim. There's one exception to this rule. that in Tanya you don't say a pshat, and that is if you're saying a pshat, which is Negin Avodah. In other words, you say something that you didn't hear from your teacher, that's not in a sikha explicitly, because it affects Avodah B'Payil. So I decided, after thinking about this, that I want to teach you this page of Tanya in this way, and then after I teach it to you, I'll teach it to you the way it was taught to me. But I want to begin in this way. This is our 6th Tanya class, okay? And we had exactly one class in which we did text. Which means for 4 weeks I was lecturing you. One of the classes that I gave you in my introduction to the Tanya was to explain to you what it means that the Tanya was written by a Rebbe. In other words, the Tanya was not written by a Goan who knows Kol HaTeira Kula, who's a great compiler, who has an incredible yedas, an incredible knowledge, and as a result of his incredible knowledge, he's able to bring together wisdom in a particular form that reveals a certain message or perspective. I explained to you at length the idea that the Tanya was written by a Rebbe. What is the significance of the Tanya being written by a Rebbe? So the first thing is, the Tanya is a Lekutei Eitzos. The Tanya is not a philosophy book. Not a philosophy book. The Tanya is a book of Avodah. The Tanya is an instruction sefer that teaches Chassidim and Yidden how to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how to achieve the Madrega of Beinani, or how to practice the Pasuk that's the Teuchen of the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, to teach people in plain words how they can come close, so they can approach, and how can they understand the Inyan and the relevance to them in their own lives of the Midah and the Madrega of Beinani. That's what the Tanya is. So I explained that when people give others any kind of counsel, particularly about inyanim ruchniim, particularly about sensitive areas, they cannot help but project themselves on another. Well, the lashon for the Friedrich Rebbe, you're describing my father in your image. When you help another person, theoretically, there's this concept called to dispersonalize. This is how mental health experts explain the objectivity of their field of medicine. There's no such thing. When a person has a broken spleen, you fix a spleen, because a spleen is a spleen is a spleen. Everyone's spleen is the same. But if a person has a broken heart, there's no such thing as hearts that are the same. So when you engage in another person's heart, you have to use your own heart as a measure and as a judge, because there's no other way for you to relate to the other person's heart. And you project yourself onto as much as you say you aren't, you are. And there's alachas kama v'kama in avodah pnimius. A yid is seeking a path to the Eibishter. A yid, a person, is looking for having a relationship with the Eibishter. So he comes to a madrich, to a mashpia, to a rav, and he seeks counsel, he seeks direction. The direction that person is going to give him is going to be a combination of the questioner, the one asking the question and seeking the advice, and the one giving it. So it's not precise. It's not reflecting the makabel 100%. It's reflecting the makabel 80%, 90%, 70%. It's impossible for another human being to be involved in another person's life where they are not a part of that relationship. The exception to this rule is a Rebbe. This is what I explained to you. I gave you the vart about a mirror. That somebody who has no predefinition can reflect you exactly. If you have a predisposition, the other person's image that's going to be reflected back is going to be qualified, it's going to be compounded, it's going to be complicated by your predefinition. But if it's clear, if there is no predefinition, then you can reflect that other person back precisely. A Rebbe is a neshama klal, he's a general soul, and he's a gift from the Eibishter to Klal Yisrael. He's a Klal person. That's his design. He's first of all for everybody, and second of all for himself. There's actually a letter, a note where the Rebbe wrote almost these exact words. And as a result, when the Rebbe gives an eitzah, the eitzah reflects only the recipient and not the giver. When the Rebbe writes a sefer of Lekutei Eitzos, it reflects not at all his personality and his madrega and his place, but entirely the people to whom he's speaking. Only a Rebbe could do this. Because only a Rebbe has that kind of clarity, kind of pshitus, that kind of plainness. So the Alter Rebbe wrote the Sefer Shel Beinanim. Alter Rebbe wrote the Sefer of Beinanim. And we all know and understand that the Alter Rebbe was very, very far removed from the Madrega of Beinanim. The Emes says that the Alter Rebbe was removed even from the Madrega of Tzaddik. We don't have Oisius. We don't have Oisius. Was made on Neshama Klovis and Neshama Chadosh of Alter Rebbe. But certainly from the Madrega of Beinanim, the Alter Rebbe had no shaychus to it. But when the Alter Rebbe wrote a Sefer of Beinani, it reflects the person he's talking to completely, and not at all him. Because that's the uniqueness of when a Rebbe writes, he completely opens himself to receive the Makabel, and what he responds is a reflection of what the Makabel needs, 100%, without any of himself in it. Like I described to you, the Yechidus, where the Rebbe Marash said, every time a person comes into Yechidus, you have to put yourself into that person. Then you have to extract yourself from that person and put yourself into the next person, and extract yourself from the second person and put yourself to the third person. And the Rebbe said, the ständige halbosh und afshote matete is the constant investing and divesting is exhausting. This is how the Rebbe Marash described Yechidus. So this is one of the very special aspects of the Tanya. Tanya was written by a Yid who had no shaykhs to Beinani whatsoever, and to Baal Tshuva that nicht. But he wrote a Sefer Shal Beinani which reflects Beinani. So I want to start this new paragraph from here. The Alter Rebbe last week gave us 3 reasons not to write the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe last week gave us 3 reasons not to write the Tanya. Not writing the Tanya would have meant what? That he would continue Yechidus, the personal meetings between the Rebbe and the Chassid. And the Alter Rebbe didn't want the Tanya. They absolutely didn't. They didn't want the Tanya. They wanted Likones, Ladaber, Iti, Imi, B'Yechidus. They wanted to meet their Rebbe, Ponim El Ponim, and have a personal involvement, and a personal hashpah, and a personal Kabbalah, v'chuli v'chuli. That's what they wanted. The Alter Rebbe decided to write the Tanya. They protested. So the Alter Rebbe first presents their protest. And the first protest was that people sometimes have a difficulty reading. They push it on mavul bolim. If a person is unclear in his own head, everything he reads is going to be unclear. The clearest document read by a foggy mind is fogged. Number 2, when a person writes a sefer of ethics and morality and even theology and spirituality, it's human. And if it's human, it's limited to a segment of people that share character with the author of the sefer. So how do you write a sefer of Musar for everybody when a sefer of Musar, which is based on human mind, is limited and reflecting a certain personality type that has an appeal to a specific group of personality types? That was the second question. And the third question is, Afilu im tim saloima, that the Tanya is Torah. You said, even if you're going to say that the Tanya is not a human endeavor at providing counsel about matters of theology and spirituality, but it's Pashat Torah based on Chazal and based on the Kubalim and based on the Vashantif and the Magid and the Rizal and so on and so forth, how does the person find his place in it? He says, if in Nigla the Torah, an argument whether chicken is kosher or treif, you have machlekes between the chachamim min hakotzel lakotzel. From one extreme to the next, this one says kosher, this one says treif, and it says elu va'elu divrei elikim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. So when you're talking about hanistoros lavaya lekeinu, the secret Torah, what's the secret Torah? A yid's neshama. The secret Torah is the Torah that gives counsel not about how to prepare a blech on Shabbos or what's kosher, not kosher, but how to prepare your mind and your heart and your soul to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do you prepare your life to cleanse it from distractions that come from the world and to engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a positive and in a happy and successful way? So this kind of a sefer is dealing with the pnimius of a person. The Alter Rebbe calls it nistaris. Right? Torah has niglas. Niglas is what to do and not to do. And nistaris is how to feel. And the way 600,000 Jews or 600,000 worlds. How are you going to write a sefer that everyone is going to be able to know his place in matters of theology, in matters of spirituality, ruchnius, what's called in Kabbalah chochma min yud kei is nistaris, vav kei is vav veha niglis, vav kei niglis. So Torah and mitzvahs, the pashtus is vav kei niglis, and pnimius ha-Torah and the avodah that comes from the neshama of Torah. This is nistaris. How's a person going to find this place? Those are the 3 protests. Number 1, people don't know how to read. Number 2, it cannot have a universal appeal. And number 3, even if it has a universal appeal, how does a person find this place? So the Alter Rebbe answers all 3 questions, and the way I'm reading it with you is with a simple answer. I'm a Rebbe, that's the answer. And I'm going to work it out. I'm a Rebbe. This is how I'm translating this. Ach beyedai umakirai koamina. The reason I can afford to write this sefer is because I know you and I recognize you. So I get a whole week I'm thinking to translate it this way. I never heard this many mashpia. So it's after nit emes, after your emes. But this is my hergish. Now the Rebbe says, I'm a Rebbe. What's the Taicha Rebbe? Many things. And one of them is, when I relate to you, there is only you. There's no me. And because when I relate to you, there is no me, there is only you, all three of these questions fall in one instant. The question that you don't know how to read, I know that you don't know how to read. I'm going to write it for you. The question that the Sefer may not be Torah, and therefore have a narrow appeal, this is talking to a person who puts his personality into his Sefer. I'm not putting my personality into the Sefer, I'm putting your personality into the Sefer. So this is not a reflection of me, it's a reflection of you, and whoever you are, the Sefer is written based on who you are. And then the third question, which is really the most serious of all, how do I find which piece of Tanya speaks to me? The answer is, I'm going to bring it to you. Because this is the koyach of a Rebbe. The koyach of a Rebbe is to say the right thing to the right person. Somebody very close to me, who was zeicha to have many very special yechidus beim Rebbe, told me, I'm moid the kavod. He was in yechidus in the 50s, 60s, I don't know when it was exactly. But there was a previous Yechidus. He didn't go in to ask the Rebbe what he should buy for lunch. He woke up and he was a previous Yechid. He is a previous Yechid. And he I don't know if he wrote or he spoke, but he had a relationship with the Rebbe. They talked. Exactly how they spoke, I don't know. So he asked a question, and the Rebbe answered his question. And after the Rebbe finished answering his question, the Rebbe said, "Un in deine Werte," and in the words you like to use, and repeated the answer a second time. Now I know this person. He speaks a different language than anybody I ever met. And in Yechidus, the Rebbe not only answered his question, but the Rebbe showed him, I understand how you think, I understand how you speak, this is how I would say it, and this is how you would say it. The Rebbe said the same thing twice. The Rebbe answered the question that he had, and when he finished, he said a second time, "Un in deine Welt," in other words, the way this would reach you from your perspective, and he said it a second time. This is genius. I mean, of course, it's called the Rebbe genius as an insult, but to be able to be in somebody else's head, not only to tell them an answer to a question, but tell them an answer to the question the way they would give that answer. You cannot do that by being smart. You can only do that by evacuating yourself and being that person. And that's what Yechidus is. And that's how we're translating these words. Alter Rebbe says, I know you. And I don't know you because I met you and I had lunch with you. I know you because this is what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe's neshama is connected inexorably to the neshamas of the whole Deir. According to Kabbalah, which is brought in Chassidus, our neshamas literally come from the neshama of the Reish B'nai Yisrael, the head, like the rest of the limbs come from a head. And the hashpos, ruchnius, and gashmius, everything that a person has, materially and spiritually, comes through the Nasi Adon. Like the story about Leischa. Hashem wants to make a bunch of people Nevi'im. How do they become Nevi'im? They take from Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah. Why can't they come direct from the Meibishter? So the Alter Rebbe explains, because everything comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. And the whole reason they needed more Nevi'im, to take a little bit of the candle of Moshe Rabbeinu's and light 70 candles, because the Yidden wanted to have meat. Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Madrega of Ayin, he couldn't give them meat, Ayin li basar. So we needed to have the Shivim Skenim, or the Madrega of Yesha, to get basar. So the Eibishter gave Moshe Rabbeinu a koyach, to give the Shivim Skenim a koyach. They should become Nevi'im, that they should give Yidden basar, flesh. Which means it comes also from Moshe Rabbeinu, but in this case, I have to come to another step. This is what a Rebbe is, and a Neshama close on Nasi B'Yisrael. So the Alter Rebbe answers the question in one sweep. I know you, and I know you, to be sure, better than you know yourself. So when I'm writing this sefer, I'm writing this sefer based on the fact that I understand that some of you think crooked, don't see things straight. And if you think that this sefer is a reflection of my personality and not of Torah, I'm telling you it's not a reflection of my personality, it's a reflection of your personality. And in as much as this sefer is Torah, I'm going to show you your place in it. So you'll be able to find how the Tanya talks to you. This is how I'm translating this. In one stuff, I'm writing as a Rebbe, as a Neshama Klos, as a Nasi B'Yisrael. And when you write from that point of view, the way you know people and the way you connect to people, on the one hand is very remote, on the other hand it's incredibly intimate. I'm talking to you. And now I'll tell you the standard. This is what I wanted to share. So, okay, I could have done bigger Avedas than this, yeah? But I wanted to share this. This is my hergish. That the Alter Rebbe says, doesn't mean I know you because I met you. Means my neshama is connected to your neshama. And because my neshama is connected to your neshama, you may not feel me, but I feel you. And from the perspective that I am, I can give you very direct and very precise and very available hayran hadracha for you. So how were we taught this in Cheder? When we learned Tanya in school, in yeshiva, how did they teach it to us? They taught it to us as follows. That the Alter Rebbe here is talking to his chassidim, as you'll see momentarily. But this is how the Mashpiyim taught these words. V'yeder makira ko'amina means that the Alter Rebbe is writing the Tanya for any Jew who will ever learn the Tanya until Mashiach comes. That any yid and any time, whenever and wherever and however, who will learn the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, the Alter Rebbe says, I am Yeder Makira, I know you. And I recognize you, and I can get inside your pneumius. And therefore, I am able to speak to you in a very personal way, in a very relevant way, in a very practical way, and get around the problems that were listed on the previous page, for all kinds of reasons. The first is the one I just gave you. It's a spiritual skill, ability, chush. But there's more, right? The Alter Rebbe has a whole page. The Alter Rebbe is going to say more things than I just told you. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain how he expects the Tanya to work, and how the Tanya was written, and so forth. But the essence of it is the Alter Rebbe says, I know you. I know you intellectually, I know you spiritually, I know you at the level of my neshama, and so forth. Kamina, I'm speaking. Redig. Ich red wegen Menschen, was ich weiß und kenn. Right? That's in Yiddish. Heim kol echad ve'echad me'anash. This is a reference to every single member of Anash. Anash is an abbreviation for Anshe Shleimeinu. That means the people of our peace. Right? The people who are members of our community. Shebe Medina Seinu, which exists in Russia. And Russia was very, very large, and I've already shared with you that the Alter Rebbe became, by the words of the Mezitcher Maggid, Rovi Begans Reisen. The Alter Rebbe became the Rebbe over the whole Russia. It wasn't meant to be that way. Russia was divided up into a bunch of parts. Each one of the Alter Rebbe's Chavedim was given a different piece of Russia, and they all left. Some went to Eretz Yisrael, some were kicked out. The Berditchev was in Pinsk. Pinsk was a big city, but they physically threw him out. And he moved to Berditchev. And this is one of the most beautiful stories you'll ever hear in the history of Gedali Yisrael, and particularly Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe had a chassid whose name was the Bisacher Ber Kabilnike. Bisacher Ber Kabilnike was originally Lubavitch. If you know the memoirs, there's a Rabbi Yosef and a Bisacher Ber. He was the Bisacher Ber from Lubavitch. Bisacher Ber Kabilnike was the Alter Rebbe's Malamed as a child. Bisacher Ber Kabilnike was a Talmud of the Maggid, and he was a Rebbe, he was a Guterid in Kabilnik. And at a certain point in his life, he closed shop and he became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. He was Alter Rebbe's Malamed. And then he was Alter Rebbe's competition. And then he became a member of the Alter Rebbe's Cheder. So as a result, Alter Rebbe ended up fortunate with Gan Rusland. It's not entirely true. You had Kalin never left Russia, Stalin, Kalin left Russia. And there's also Lechovich, which I think is called Slonim, that didn't leave Russia. But by and large, all the Chassidish Kreis, all the Chassidish communities that the Mezitcher Maggid, the Talmidim formed, in parceling out Russia, they ended up in Alter Rebbe's lap by default, by evacuation. And Alter Rebbe became a Rebbe, began to Islam. The Mezitcher Maggid called him a Rebbe, began to Reis. So the Medina Sein of our country was Smuchet Shalahem, and those are near it. Asher Hoya Hadibo Shel Chibah Motze Benenu. That there were words of love, words of affection, words of intimacy between us. And I'm going to share, again, in the spirit of what I said before, that you have in Tanya, you get Zakedesh Chav Zayin, Zach, the 27th letter. In the Tanya it talks about Tzaddik de Spater, a tzaddik who passes away. And the Alter Rebbe makes the point, quoting the Zayir of course, that when a tzaddik passes away, he's still in this world. And in certain aspects, the ruach of the tzaddik, the nefesh of the tzaddik, is more in this world with less concealment than when he was during his physical lifetime. And the Alter Rebbe uses the expression, Kol HaKarev Karev Kedim Lebrach. The closer you are to the tzaddik, which means that the more you have feelings for the tzaddik, and the more in tune to the tzaddik, the more you see and feel the tzaddik in your life. So, Dibur Shel Chiba, doesn't necessarily have to mean that literally a person physically met the Alter Rebbe. If there is a sense of relationship between a Yid and the Alter Rebbe, after the stalkers of the Alter Rebbe on a level of Chiba, the idea of a Yediyah Makira, that the Alter Rebbe is knowing this person and speaking to this person, is even stronger. And they reveal to me all the mystery, all the secret of what's in their heart and in their mind and serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to think what you're saying here. We read these words. We read these words. You imagine Alter Rebbe being a therapist. It sounds like Alter Rebbe is a therapist, and people are commenting with their emotional issues, and Alter Rebbe is putting them on a couch, or whatever they did before they invented the couch, and it gets the eitzes. You're talking about Avodas Hashem. People who are servants of the Eibishter. And Talumes Liba Momeichem Avodas Hashem means their struggle of purifying their bodies, and purifying their minds, and purifying their hearts, filling it with godliness, and then climbing and growing from step to step and from level to level in the V'derach HaEla Beiskel, come closer to the Eibishter. Everybody understands that the relationship with the Eibishter is Ein Sof. And everybody understands that when a person is involved in serving the Eibishter, it gets complicated. For simple people, the complications are also simple. Don't do an Aveda, or don't do an Aveda again. But for big people, the complications have to do with obstacles and blockages and confusions that they get in their journey of Avedas Hashem, of Avas Hashem, and Yiras Hashem. They get entangled, and they have to be disentangled, and they came to the Alter Rebbe for Pnimiyas things. And for Pnimiyas people come to the Alter Rebbe, they're at very high levels, but they're very pure, they're very good, so they come to the Alter Rebbe and say, we want to be even more pure, even more good, and we need the Alter Rebbe's counsel. And they told the Alter Rebbe, I had a situation in school last week which was really moving. The class was quite dynamic. I teach Besivka Seminary, I teach in Tanya, and it's very interesting. We're not learning much Tanya, but we're talking a lot of very good things, yeah. But the discussion was about the idea of tshuva being associated with sadness. This was the conversation that we had. So one of the girls said to me, okay, I can't give you the whole context because I don't have an hour, I have a few minutes. If you have a choice to do another mitzvah, or to help another person, or to do some other activity, or to do tshuva, when on the list of priorities does tshuva come in? And again, if I told you the whole conversation, you'd understand the context. But I'm not, I'm just giving you the nekuda. This girl, when are you supposed to do tshuva? So I answered her, and it became very lebedik in class. The answer evoked a lot of response. I said to her, you know when you're ready to do tshuva? You know when you do tshuva? When you're ready to do tshuva. Do tshuva when you're ready. So the girl obviously did not understand what I was saying. So she questioned me, what do you mean we're ready to do tshuva? So I said to her the truth. I said, listen, most of us don't have many different avedas. We're not guilty of 100 different sins. We're guilty of 1 or 2 or 3, but we repeat them again and again and again and again. Yeah? So what does that mean we do tshuva? Huh? We feel bad until the next time. I said, do tshuva when you're really ready to stop. When you're mamish not going to do it again. And this created a whole storm. So I said to the girls, what's the point of tshuva? The point of tshuva is, it says in Tanya, you shouldn't sin again. The girls heard from other teachers all kinds of other things, which are also written in Tanya, but this is the pshat of tshuva means, I won't do it again. I won't do it again. I'm not going to do it again. So you do tshuva, and what, tomorrow you do it again? Don't waste your time. Be besimcha. And I explained to them that this is what the Rebbe meant. When the Rebbe said, B'masiyach das. Don't think about it. Live your life. Yeah, but you have to do tshuva. So there's a story. I told him the mice with Reuven Dunin, and one of his granddaughters was sitting in class. Reuven Dunin came into the Rebbe. It's also a long story, but you don't have time to tell. And he said to the Rebbe, I want you to teach me how to do tshuva. And the Rebbe said to him, first be a yid, b'simcha, then I'll teach you how to do tshuva. It took 25 years. 25 years for the Rebbe to answer that question. So you understand the Rebbe cooked off the roof, right? In other words, from the Rebbe's perspective, for 25 years, he was not ready to do tshuva, not because he didn't help us, but tshuva. Tshuva means, lo yosher v'ed l'kis. So, we have other kinds of problems, right? And the Tanya, believe it or not, speaks to us also. You have to just know where to look in the Tanya. But the Tanya is also speaking to people who are not connected to Aveda whatsoever. Their struggles is b'chashecha yishalochu b'avedas havayit. There's a person who sat day and night and learned Teda and Daven and served the Meibish. And they wanted a relationship with Atzmus and Hussein Salbarcha. They wanted a connection to the Meibish. and they sought the Alter Rebbe's counsel in resolving the entanglements and the confusions and the burdens that came along with this journey. And the Alter Rebbe says, Gilu lefonai kol ta'alumis. They kept no secrets from me. When your biggest problem is that the Avas Hashem is not as shturendik as you think, it's very easy to be honest, or it's easier to be honest. The Alter Rebbe Chassidim. But again, even though the Tanya was written directly on the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe wrote into the Tanya for everybody of all generations till Mashiach comes, for a variety of different reasons, and above all else, and below all else, and inside all else, because he's a Rebbe. His Rebbe means his Yediyah, and his Hakara, the way he knows and recognizes a Yid, is first of all because there's nothing subjective. He's not imposing himself on the Hadrach, it's just you, and he knows you because he knows the Neshama, and therefore he can speak to us in the most comprehensive and honest way. So let's read a bit weiter. Hatluya belev, which is dependent on matters of the heart, says the Alter Rebbe, Aleim titeif milos. It is to them that my words drip. Ulesheni yeit sefer. And my tongue, which has now become the pen of a scribe. In other words, before I would speak, and now I'm going to take a pen, I'm going to dip it into ink, and I'm going to put it to paper. L'sheinam eit sefer. My tongue is eit sefer. B'kontreisim elu. In the following pamphlets. And again, I want to remind you how I explained this to you in one of the introductory classes, that when the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya the first time, it was never meant to be published. It was meant just to be distributed in manuscript, and it was called Kuntreisim, like Rashi. You know, Rashi and Shas. Rashi's Pirush and Shas is called Kuntris. When you learn Gemara, yeah, you have Gemara and Rashi and Tesis. Tesis never says Pirush Rashi. Tesis always says Pirush HaKuntris. Because Rashi's Pirush was given out as Kuntreisim, pamphlets. So the Alter Rebbe adopted that term from Rashi. Maybe it was even his Zayda Rashi, but I don't know about that. And he called his Sefer Kuntreisim, pamphlets. Later on, because of Fashida Nesibas, Shenus and Meshurus, he had to publish it. So he rewrote it, but the name stuck. It's called Kuntreisim, pamphlets. Hanikroyim b'shem, which carry the name Lekutei Amorim, a collection of sayings. And of course, in these words, Lekutei Amorim, you have the greatest anova imaginable. Where the Alter Rebbe is saying, in effect, I'm not creating anything originally. I'm simply compiling existing ideas. There's few svarim in the history of humankind, and certainly in the history of Torah or Hagel, that is more original than Sefer Tanya Kadisha. And the Alter Rebbe chooses to refer to his Sefer as a likut. It's a collection of sayings that he gathered from others. It's true, he did gather from others, but that he gathered the form from others. The neshama is the Alter Rebbe's neshama. Melukatim, which are compiled and collected mipi svarim u'mipi seferim, from svarim and seferim. Again, this is how Mashpiyim always explain this. Svarim means the Arizal and the Shalah or the Maral, and seferim means the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Maggid. In other words, there are published works that are the basis for many of the ideas in the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, and then there are unpublished works which the Rebbe had as Teresh Baal Peh from his Rebbes, from the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid as well. But there's a third category. Kedei Elye Nishmasa Meiden, the holy ones from on high, whose souls are in Gan Eden, Hamefasam and Metzayin, who we know, meaning the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, everybody knew of them. And then he adds a third category. Oksas Mehem, there was Nachtinim, and some of the ideas which are incorporated in this Sefer are hinted to those who are intuitive. Be'igreis HaKedesh Mirabei Seinu Shebe'eretz HaKedesh Tibona V'Zekeinu Be'Vehei Reb Yemenu Amen. The Alter Rebbe corresponded with his Rebbes living in Eretz Yisrael. And over here he doesn't say Nishmas Eidim, which is very interesting. The Alter Rebbe's Rebbe was a Mendel of Vitebsker. The Mendel of Vitebsker passed away before the Tanya was written, and certainly before the Tanya was published. And the Rebbe doesn't say Nishmas Eidim. Hard to say why, but one of the explanations is because the Alter Rebbe actually had two people he corresponded with in Eretz Yisrael. One was a Mendel Haradakir, who had passed away, who was his Rebbe, and the second was a Avram Kalisker, who was still alive. And Avram Kalisker, the Alter Rebbe writes him in a letter, if anybody's Rebbe, I'm yours, as opposed to the other way around. But in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe refers to him as Rabbi Seinu, Loshen Rabbim, Sheberetz HaKedesh, Tibonu V'Sekeinu, Meher Menu Amen. And that's why he doesn't say Nishmas Eidim, because when the Tanya was written and published, Avram Kaliski was very, very much alive. Begashmit, V'chaim Chayosei B'al Mahadin. V'kulan Hein Tshuveis Al Shailis Rabbis. They're all answers to the many questions. Asher Sheilim Be'ezah. People are asking to find counsel. Kol Anash de Medina Seinu, all of the Chassidim, all the members of our community, from our country, Talmud all the time. Kol Echad Lefi Erke, each one according to his level and his worth. Lashis Eitzeis B'Nafsham Ba'Avedes Havayim, to place counsel, to provide clarity in their spirits, in serving the Eibishter. Lihiyais, considering the fact, Ki Ein Hazman Grama, there's simply not enough time, the Alter Rebbe says. And as I explained to you several times, there's two factors here. The first factor is that there were many more Chassidim who were involved in Teres Chassidus Chabad. And the second factor is that the way the Alter Rebbe operated was that as every year passed, he lowered the standard of entry. When Alter Rebbe first became a Rebbe, he only allowed in God Grace, and the Alter Rebbe was Madrich and Mechanech them on a very high Madrege. And as time passed, he opened it up to lower and lower people. So it was not only, there were more people, there were people, frankly, didn't need the Alter Rebbe directly to teach them how to serve the Eibishter, because it was a lower level of Vedas Hashem. Oid, anymore. Lahashiv l'kol echad ve'echad al she'elasei bepratos, to answer each one's question specifically. And therefore, you can read the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, and any question you have is answered. V'gam, another thing. Hashikcha b'tzei, people forget. Now frankly, let's be very direct. If the Alter Rebbe listens to his Chassidim and doesn't write the Tanya, why? Because they want to have Yechidus. The Alter Rebbe is nostalgic, and that's the end of it. For them, may have been better, you can say. But for us, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya for Kol HaDeiros Kulam, right? The Tanya is ours, Tanya's everybody's. And the Alter Rebbe says people are going to forget. So I'm writing it all down. Al Kain, therefore, Rashamti, listen to these words. Kol HaTshuvas, Al Kol HaShailas. You hear, Alter Rebbe says, every answer to every question. The Alter Rebbe argues, asserts, there is no question you could ask about matters of Vedas Hashem that I don't address and respond in the Sefer. It's quite, like the Rebbe says, the Rambam begins with Ozle, Eivish, Ba'abiti, Al Kol Mitzvah. The Rambam takes a look and he says, I know Kol HaTeira Kula. I know everything. There's Lo Eivish, nothing to be ashamed of. Alter Rebbe is saying, Al Kol HaTshuvas, Al Kol HaShailas, every answer to every question in the Yonim of Pnimius and Vedas Hashem are all written into the Tanya Kadisha. You can't find it? Look again. Lemishmeres le'eis, to be preserved as a sign. Le'yeis lekol echad ve'echad lezikoren beinin, to be for each individual as something which you can remember between his eyes. And the Alter Rebbe says, v'layitchek eid, people should stop pushing and insisting likones, to come in, ledaber imi b'yechidus, to speak to me personally b'yechidus. Ki bohen, in the Tanya, yimsa margeya lenafshe, everybody can find margeya. You know what margeya means? Calm, serenity for his nefesh. Ve'etza nechaina, and correct, and nechaina means also prepared, ready to use counsel. L'chol davar hakasha Allah v'vedas havayim, every word, everything which is difficult for each person of Vedas Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe finishes by saying, "V'nochain yiyeh libei betuach ba'avav," and in the end, it's all with Sayata Dishmaya. All of this success is because libei betuach ba'avav, the Eibishter helps. So Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, and he says, you look in your Tanya, you'll find the answers to your questions. And you also have HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezrei, the Eibishter helps, who is Geimer Ba'adeinu, who finishes all of our efforts. And in Mitzvah Hashem next week, I may reread a little bit what I just read, but we're going to call it a Shir. Okay.